Hello, everybody. I hope you got your coffee, tea, or juice, whatever you're drinking. Here we are again on our, what is this now? I'm starting to lose track. We've done so many of these. 38th episode? Is that what it is? Something like that? He's not sure either. Well, that's a good thing. That's where you start getting into the good stuff when you get so many episodes in that you've already chased away all those souls that can't digest what you're saying, and that's okay. They have better things to do, at least as far as they're concerned. Well, today, uh, well, let's just say the other day, Reverend David and I, that's Reverend David William Parry, give you his honorific, uh, coming to you from the city of London, near the square mile, but not in it, in merry old England. And myself, John Barnwell, coming to you from the Motor City, Detroit, the Straits. Anyway, now that we know all that, Reverend David and I had a discussion the other day. It's rare that we get to talk outside of our little conclave here, but it's always fortuitous when we do. And we decided it might be a good time to begin to try and come to terms with the relationship between Rudolf Steiner and his spiritual science and the theosophy of Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and her secret doctrine. So I thought, well, that's, that's a huge subject, and I tend to be a little bit caught up in my role as a court jester to get around to some of the more profound things. And that's probably a good thing because it can be difficult to digest. But the pelican serves its young from its own breast. And so it's a path paved in self sacrifice. In our case, we attribute it directly to the Lord of redemption, our Lord Jesus Christ, the incarnation of the second Logos. I am the way, the truth, and the life, he says. And he doesn't mean that as an analogy, he doesn't mean it figuratively, but he means it literally. And so just saying that probably chased quite a few people away. And that's good because this is not for them yet. Although we all have to come to terms with it eventually. And so, in pursuing that approach, I started thinking about the distinctions between the singular works of Rudolf Steiner and Madame Blavatsky, and it brought to mind an essay done by a noted former anthroposophist. He left anthroposophy and returned, or perhaps retreated, to the Catholic Church, and that's his path. But he is nonetheless a significant author in the annals of Western esoteric writings. And his early anthroposophical works are quite remarkable and unique in his ability to penetrate to such a profound level. But as he developed in life, he returned to the Catholic Church and concerned himself primarily with what would what we would call neo-Catholic Christian Hermeticism of particularly French cast of mind, so that in his major work, Meditations on the Tarot, he deals with the 22 major arcana of the tarot as 22 fundamental archetypes. Those of you that have read my books know that I use that systematic approach to organize the fundamental archetypes and concepts of Rudolf Steiner's spiritual science. And it's not really a response to Valentin Tomberg's work, because I had been doing that in my own studies for many, many years before I came across him. I was amongst the small group of people that were receiving chapters of Tomberg's work as it was translated from the original French by Robert Powell. And one of his circle, William Bento, wrote the foreword to my second book, The Arcana of Light on the Path. And you can download that foreword on my academia website listed below. You could download it for free. It's quite remarkable. William Bento is one of the more remarkable people that I have known, and he's since passed on. And so I wish him the best wherever he may be at this time. But getting back to those two compendiums, Madame Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine, published in 1888, and Rudolf Steiner's Esoteric Science, published years later. Now, he makes the point that two comprehensive works which deal with the whole occult world conception have appeared in modern times within Occidental culture: The Secret Doctrine of H.P. Blavatsky and An Outline of Esoteric Science by Rudolf Steiner, earlier called An Outline of Occult Science. These are the only two works containing communications of a cosmological nature which were of value for their true revelations. These two works, in the midst of a large number of writings with symbolic content, containing half-obscure, half-truths, either theoretical Kabbalistic expositions or mystical lyrical effusions, contain more or less completed pictures of a world conception entirely unknown to the public. The truth of the matter, one would have to admit, is that not one of the well-known theosophical or Kabbalistic writings can be compared in objective value with them, for not one of the works of occult literature offers the reader so much as they do. And that's a direct quote from that article by Valentin Tomberg. Those are quite profound words to say about any writing. And to add to that, although he may have not been aware of it, I don't know, but there's also a book that I've made mention of many times on here, The Transcendental Universe by C.G. Harrison, which also deals with the cosmological, cosmogonic schemata that's the basis of Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine and Rudolf Steiner's Occult Science and Outline. And so, beginning with that, first off, I'd love to get some prefatory remarks to what I just said from Reverend David Parry in London. Hello, David.
Good afternoon, my friend. I'm sporting this to everyone at the minute. Right. There aren't many belly laughs, but it's good, solid reading. I'm going through this thing at the moment about what was Kelvin really understood or not. So I'll let everybody know when I've worked my way through some rather depressing doctrines. I don't know, it's a little nagging thing that maybe he's not understood properly. Because Augustine, I mean, a lot of it's from St. Augustine, and really St. Augustine isn't understood as clearly as he should be. A lot of it's perennial thinking. In St. Augustine's Confessions, a lot of it is perennialist, and therefore, I don't know, there's something niggling at me at the minute. A felicitous Sunday to you, my friend. No, we don't spend enough time off camera to talk. That is my fault. I will do something about that. Oh, gosh. Before I go into my prefatory remarks, I keep thinking of an old British sitcom, It Ain't Our Hot Mum, which, of course, is banned by the new woke generation. And I just thought, because you had a British character actor who was acting as an Indian, and of course you're not allowed to do that now because you're not acting, you're being yourself, which of course means you can't act. And I just used to love the skits that went with it. You'd have sort of traditional British songs sung to a sitar with a sort of Hindu beat to them, and in my mind at the minute. And reminiscent of Blavatsky, I like Blavatsky. As I sort of intimated on our show a couple of times, I'm beginning to see all of these things as footnotes to scripture. After all, they're not unimportant. And also, I don't believe, with the more pessimistic of my brethren, that they're hooks trying to lure us away into darkness. I just don't think they are, sorry. Just because they're not perfect, it doesn't mean that they're hooks dragging us down into the netherworld. Therefore, we've got to ask what they are. And also, we've got to ask fundamental questions, like, if scripture really is inspired, what does that mean? I personally think it is inspired. But that's the beginning of the story, not the end of the story. And therefore, if you're dealing with the status and the notion that the supernatural has entered human cultural history in the form of text, i.e. scripture, then all of a sudden a lot's up for grabs, including Blavatsky, who would not, of course, have said her works are inspired. I am more or less comfortable with Blavatsky for the simple reason that she actually went to a lot of the places she said she did. The court is still out, I think, of whether she went to all of them or not. And of course, that depends whether you're sympathetic to the woman or not. I think that she's a good, honest Russian, good, honest, chubby Russian. So I suspect she probably did go to the majority of them, if not all of them. I like the way she presents her masters, because that makes sense to me. They're experts in their field. They're expert at either an occult practice or a meditation technique, or they've been to sort of esoteric libraries and they've read their way through them. I can imagine all of that as possible and conceivable. Steiner, of course, is an adept. Words I find difficult to pin down nowadays. Was Madame Blavatsky an adept? I don't know. I suspect so. Therefore, when you're dealing with the relationship between a Russian author and traveler, an intrepid traveler for a woman in those days, who actually went to try and find all these materials and then make sense of it in a variety of languages, I think you're looking at a fascinating individual who is very, very misrepresented in the modern world, compared to Steiner, the rather classic German scholar with a massive mystical adjunct to that. I mean, I still think Steiner's problem with theosophy is a problem I sort of have. I mean, one always gets the impression that sort of, Christianity will catch up one day. If you read Blavatsky, we've all got a lot to learn. Although even then she contradicts herself. Apart from the Russian Orthodox Church, you're just being partisan, love. Either we've all got a lot to learn or we don't. No, sorry, they're Christians too, whether you like it or not. So she keeps saying the liturgies are so beautiful, all this hidden knowledge. Well, it's not just them, is it? So I even like Isis Unveiled. I suppose one of the problems I have with that is when she started her career, the mysteries were all centered in Egypt, and then some of the societies actually I belong to started saying, no, it's all to do with the Far East and Central Asia. Then all of a sudden, the knowledge came from there. So you get the secret doctrine. No, I think she's given too much of a hard press. The relationship between theosophy and anthroposophy is overly complex, and you get sort of egos getting involved. I don't mean by Steiner. And I think his critique is very well founded because, again, it harks back to what I was saying. What is the ontology of Scripture? You know, is it inspired or not? And if it is, then it simply cannot be on a par, on a comparative level with other sacred scriptures. It simply can't, unless you then want to say they're all inspired. But that isn't what they say. I mean, if you're looking at the Hindus as a case in point, they do not say every single scripture they have is inspired. They say very clearly that some are works of mysticism and some are works of human reason dealing with occultism. So we've got to be careful about what we're going with, where we're going with all this, and what we mean by it. I wish there was more of a healthy interplay between those two schools, because I think we've got a lot to learn. If they ever stop taking pot shots at each other and actually start dialoguing, that does happen sometimes. It doesn't happen often enough. I find myself curiously, I mean, I'm in the presence of a Steiner scholar, which I'm very aware of, so I try and keep my fire under control on that. I know slightly more about theosophy because that was the first society I joined before I moved to London, actually. I'm also one of the first people to trip over the enormous statue of Buddha at their headquarters. I'm sorry, it's so big I didn't notice what was there. They've got this wonderful staircase at TS headquarters in Gloucester Place, and I was walking down the staircase years back with a number of books and nearly went stump over wicket where I didn't see this gigantic Buddha in front of me. I'm sorry, that could happen to anybody. And I do want our Nephilim Anthropology Conference. I've got to get it in because it's next Saturday. I want the second leg. I want the leg next year to be actually at the Theosophical Society. I think from the dealings I had with them, I haven't really been down there for years. They're aware of the tortured relationship I have with it all, but I don't think they're aware enough of the positive feelings I have towards it. Certainly a colleague of mine, the Reverend Jim Wilhelmsen, who is a very good friend of mine too. I mean, a conservative evangelical who wrote an extraordinary book. I don't know if you read it, John, Beyond Science Fiction. Gosh, I'll get him to send you a copy. I mean, it's the phenomenologist in me just goes gaga every time I look at that, and I'm not having a go, but apparently Nazis are in the inner earth in their UFOs waiting to attack us all any second. The phenomenologist in me, that's all a question mark. I don't know. But, you know, what a great book. Certainly Jim thinks it's all wickedness, and he would say astonishing things like the Antichrist has already been here and it was Hitler. I mean, there's a rather compelling case for that, but I still don't believe Hitler was the Antichrist. Things can get worse. And of course, Jim would say it was his fascination with theosophy that really gives the final sort of death blow to all this stuff. Because he was a nut about it, all those people ended up dying. With the deepest respect to Jim, I'm not sure that's the whole story. And certainly her masterful exegesis, her marrying of a number of cosmologies which are native certainly to Central Asia, because I can recognize some of them, and stories originating from the Gobi Desert, the Desert of No Return, originating from some of the monasteries in that magical part of the world, some of which I recognize. We need to approach Theosophy and Blavatsky differently, on a different footing, because we also need to put Steiner in his rightful position as a Christian adept of the First Order. And until that's done, I don't think we're going to get a clear vision of either HPB the Explorer or Steiner, the illuminated occultist. That's my initial foray, John. I'll hand it back to you to see what you think of that.
Well, interesting. People tend to want to resolve questions that they have. They really want to have closure. Aha, I figured it out. And so one of the biggest problems is, as I've said ad nauseum, time and time again, this desire for closure. What it does is it causes us to accept a closed set to where we feel we have sufficient information to make final conclusions. And when Georg Cantor, the brilliant mathematician, he really opened the door into open set thinking, and not that it didn't exist, but it hadn't been formalized within the realm of mathematics until he came along and really opened it up. By open set, I mean basically the view of any scientist who's being honest is that you don't have all the information, that you're just trying to build a hypothesis based upon the limited knowledge that you have access to. And Rudolf Steiner is very clear about certain spiritual scientific facts, so to speak. And again, he says that, facts, they mustn't be misunderstood, because just because something's a fact doesn't mean it's relevant to, and so you can tend to bring in elements into the quest. And this is really what we're doing. We're on a quest here. We're trying to find what is truth, in the words of Pontius Pilate, and that there isn't a final answer if you're really honest in your pursuit. But there are signposts along the way that are very, very revelatory, shall we say. For example, Rudolf Steiner said that nothing that occurs in the world that's material causes anything. Now that'll chase a few people away, I'm sure, because they'll think I'm absolutely crazy for saying that. But if you look into the whole concept that's embraced, for example, in India, you mentioned India, and I thought about talking about that because you can't avoid it when speaking about Madame Blavatsky. But in India, they have the concept of Maya, that the world is an illusion. And it's been characterized by them as a dream, and that which we perceive as material being is just this dream, that it has no real factual existence, that this is something that is projected, an outpouring of the activities of supersensible beings. And that is a viewpoint that Rudolf Steiner makes from so many different perspectives, that's what makes his work so challenging, because one might think he's contradicting himself, when no, he's just approaching it from another perspective to widen your gaze to the matter at hand. And so let's go back to this whole idea of the secret doctrine, and because the secret doctrine is constructed on a subject theme that I frequently return to, because it's the basis of my second book. The type of thinking that deals with the sevenfold schemata of reality, and that the earth is the fourth world, the physical world that we live in. That's the fourth mystery, the mystery of birth and death. And in fact, C.G. Harrison actually has a book that he wrote that's extremely hard to find at times, called The Fourth Mystery. And this harkens back to Madame Blavatsky made reference just in passing in the preface to her great 2-volume work, The Secret Doctrine, where she attempts to create a bridge between science and religion. And in the preface, she makes reference to what she calls the 7 unutterable secrets that provide a key, the occult keys for unlocking all the secrets that are contained within occult writings, true occult writings, which includes genuine inspired scriptures. That there is a 7 level of interpretation possible in these types of documents. And going through the sequence, in Rudolf Steiner's schemata, he talks about old Saturn, and then old Sun, and then old Moon, and then our present Earth, the 4th world. And then there's 3 following: future Jupiter, future Venus, and future Vulcan. These are, of course, referred to as globes by Madame Blavatsky. But the critical point in Rudolf Steiner's view of that is what he calls the turning point of time. And that's the incarnation of Christ that serves as that turning point of time to where we move from the Mars half of Earth evolution to the Mercury half of evolution. Due to the effect of lagging, the center of Earth evolution should have been really in the middle of the Atlantean or 4th period. But because of activities of the contrary company of beings, it became later in the 5th post-Atlantean period. In the 4th post-Atlantean period of the 5th period. So we're in the 5th period. We're past the whole post-Atlantean period is called the 5th period, and we're in the 5th period of that. And Christ incarnated in the 4th post-Atlantean period. I try not to be confusing in a subject that is not easy to grapple with. But so you see that there's preceding great periods, and then these are divided up according to a mirroring schemata, so that you have the Polarian epic, and then the Hyperborean epic, and then the Lemurian, and then the Atlantean, and then the post-Atlantean, which is our present great period here. And we're in the 5th period of that period. So we're in the 5th post-Atlantean epic, you could say. And that's the epic of the consciousness soul. And Christ incarnated in the 4th, the Greco-Roman period. And in looking at these sequences, you can see that it's a chain of 7. There's 3 behind and 3 before, and then there's the 4th in the middle. There's a recapitulation on the 2-sided threefold, but there is no recapitulation of any 4th period in the sequence. And that's that 4th mystery, which we call the 4th mystery of birth and death. Old Saturn is the mystery of the abyss. Old Sun is the mystery of number. Old Moon is the mystery of affinity or alchemy. The Earth is the 4th, that's the mystery of birth and death. The 5th is the mystery of evil. The 6th is the mystery of the Logos. And the 7th, the Vulcan stage, is the mystery of godliness. Now, in sharing those, you see that with the theme of recapitulation, that the mystery of evil on the fifth period recapitulates the third period of affinity, and the sixth period, the mystery of the logos, is a recapitulation of the mystery of number, and the seventh period, the mystery of godliness, is recapitulating the mystery of the abyss. So you see that when we achieve that stage to where we've fully manifested the what Rudolf Steiner calls the spirit man or spirit human. In India, they call the Atman. That's when we've fully evolved into the stage of the Archai or spirits of time, which is so profound. I mean, that's one stage beyond the archangels, of which we would achieve in the Venus period. And Rudolf Steiner is very clear that if were you to be confronted by an archangel, you would think that you'd seen Almighty God. So let me be clear about this. And then to Jupiter, that's the angelic stage. And when mankind finishes being human, then they proceed to the angelic stage. Now, all beings in the universe, according to Blavatsky, evolve through the sevenfold stage of sequences. And Rudolf Steiner, it's interesting that his take on Blavatsky, because he had tremendous respect for her. And it's difficult to grasp the degree of challenges that she fought just to manifest her work. And so, although she didn't have the keys to unlock the mysteries of the West, she was beginning to in Isis Unveiled, and she was receiving inspiration from the masters in the West, specifically the Comte Saint Germain, and her aunt had possession of original documents pertaining to the Comte Saint Germain. So he was not a complete stranger to her family circle. She was from an interesting family. The von Hahn family they date back to the original czars of Russia. So she's from an interesting noble house. Blavatsky, when she was a young woman, she married a General Blavatsky. She never consummated the marriage. She ran away and took off to India. And that's an interesting story. Throughout her life, she did think she at one time was a concert pianist. Another time, she worked in a circus, doing stunts on horseback. I mean, who does that? I tell people when I run to them, I'm going to go back to my old job being a circus clown. It's easier. And but I really wasn't a circus clown. She really was a circus acrobat, which you look at her and you go, no, it's not possible. You look at her because she's huge, but that's much later in life. And so she's one of the more interesting people you can study. And when Rudolf Steiner was confronted with her works, he went through them very judiciously, and he said, that, I mean, her commentary is so scattered, and it was clear that she didn't understand the mysteries of the West, but he very clearly could feel the sincerity from which she was approaching the subject. But she was involved in all kinds of machinations involving the lodges in England and in America, and they ended up putting her in occult imprisonment, which prevented her from penetrating beyond her own astral sheath and be able to perceive in the astral light the things that she could see before. And she was only released from that when she came in contact with masters from India, the Kuthumi and Master Moria, both of which, by the way, are obviously Sikhs, as they're tying a turban, and which is an interesting perspective, and that's ties really much into my own personal experience, because as a young man, I had some encounters tied into Sikhism. So that's one of the schools uh, I've studied for quite a while, and I'd love to talk about that. But I've been going so long, I don't want to put so many threads out there that David doesn't know which one to grab. But go ahead, David.
You're right. I don't know which one to grab. Samsara. As I say, I think Blavatsky, the character, needs revisiting. I mean, it's only really her and Madame Alexandra David Neal, who's another heroine. Sorry, I like appropriate pronouns. That's one of the reasons I've got he, him, his at the bottom of my screen. I mean, I remember the first time I read Magic and Mystery in Tibet by Alexandra David Neal, and it opens with her fairy prince, who of course is an aristocrat from Tibet, and I know exactly what she means. If anyone has ever travelled in that part of the world, it's fairyland. I mean, the costumes, the colours, the quality of light, the people, I knew exactly what she meant. And also her first experience of the paranormal. I think we've got to be very careful with our terms in all of this. For me, the paranormal must mean an adjunct of the physical in some way or other, whereas the supernatural does not imply that. You're talking about a different realm, a different type of beingness. So certainly if we're talking about the paranormal, her first encounter with a Buddhist monk from that part of the world, as far as I recall, I read it many years ago, was a man taking huge leaps in a state of trance. And she realizes it's one of their ways of getting quickly from A to B. They put themselves into a trance to speed the process, literally. And that is the mindset of that part of the world. I mean, if one has had the privilege to be there, that is recognizable. Part of the reason they think that is, I'm trying to avoid the word normal. I mean, I wouldn't tend to have a paranormal conversation in Central Asia, because for them it is a part of normalcy. It's not really something separate. That's something the West has declined into. So, I wouldn't really go around saying, oh my God, that's interesting, and the powers of hypnosis, yada, yada, because they wouldn't really see why I was drawing attention to that. And therefore a skill of a meditation skill of getting from A to B very quickly by the use of trance and physical health wouldn't really be that extraordinary to them, even though it was extraordinary to her as a French scholar. And that, I suppose, is half the attitude that's misunderstood in Blavatsky. I mean, as an aside for a moment, yes, the Sikhs are extraordinary. I used to go and have a regular meal over in the temple. Oh gosh, what part of London was that? I'm trying to remember. In Southall, which is, you can't have a pure Britain. Nobody's pure here. Everything's a mixture here. It's beginning to follow the American pattern of segmentation, which is a little sad. So Southall, because it's Britain, I'm not talking about what Americans should do. I'm talking about what Britain should do. Certainly Southall is sort of a Sikh area, and all of their temples offer a free meal. And what impressed me, shame on all of us as Christians, was that this is a meal literally free, served mostly all day, and everyone was welcome. And I noticed the poor and the homeless of Southall, along with the Sikhs, and this poor pastor was actually made to feel welcome and enjoyed a very good meal. I can't speak highly enough of the Sikhs and their witness, and the fact that even when they know I'm a short puff pastor, I still get called very honorific names, because they are seeking and searching for God. Yes, I noticed that too, that the two masters you mentioned are clearly Sikhs. I'd mentioned that too, but that's an aside we need to get into, I think. In terms of pure Blavatsky, yeah, I mean, she was a big girl when she was getting on in life. That's true. But I mean, she was a sylph in earlier days. And I think it shows something of the type of person you're dealing with, that she was a circus performer. You know, someone, you know, the part of me, the hat that I wear, where I'm also in British theatre, you meet some wonderful and lively people and some very acute minds who live life to the full. There's a vibrancy there. That part of her biography never contradicts anything for me, and if anything, brings it to life, which is a preamble to this. Yeah, I suspect that her inability to grasp Christian mystery as the ultimate mystery school, which I think we must say it is if we're truly Christian, and we can say many other things, but it must be that, really reflects not only on the fact she was an explorer and a journalist, let's not forget that. Also, of course, she was accused of spying. So both you and my companion can endlessly berate me about whether she was or whether she wasn't. You know, she was collecting notes, she was collecting knowledge, she was collecting occult experience on a paranormal and, she would say, supernatural level. And that is a profound and frightening thing to say. And you know, we need to see more her work more in. You know, it's hard to imagine. I remember the first time I read The Secret Doctrine. I'm lazy nowadays. I read The Key to Theosophy like every other lazy bugger, because you know you get caught in the endless chapters and the endless information in the endless chapters. So I admit that. You know, The Key to Theosophy is quick, and you find what you want, and you can get back to normal life. But you know, it was hard thinking that that was the work of one human being, until you begin to think, hang on, a lot of it's reportage, a lot of it's reporting, a lot of it's giving an account of something, and not designed to be the experience in itself. I mean, you get compare that to reading Alice Bailey. Who again I've time for. I don't think she's the arch demon of modern times. You know, just because she likes the UN, we all know what's wrong with the UN. We all know what's wrong with the UN. You know, it doesn't mean that the good intentions that were behind the UN means someone's corrupt. It started with good intentions. You know, with her and her view of the masters, I don't know. I feel a lot more uncomfortable with that, even though I'm interested in what she has to say. I mean, these are supernormal beings from the word go that just happen to be in empirical worldly positions. Like one of them's a Tibetan monk, and you think, well, you know, why is he doing that? You know, he's got all these immense powers. Why isn't he ruling Russia? You know, if he can really do whatever he wants at will, why are you doing that? You know, do something. Get off your ass, man, and do something more effective. Whereas with Blavatsky, you think, well, no, I can see that. You know, there's a yoga teacher talking about yoga. There's a magician, maybe not for want of a better word, who's talking about magic, and they're talking about it from an Eastern perspective because they're guys from the East. No, I don't know. Oh my God, I'm sounding like an HPB apologist, which I hope I'm not coming across it. I just think interesting people need to be seen in context. She's clearly an interesting person. She's willfully misunderstood. All right, this is my pot shot of the week. Somebody told me I always have a pot shot on these shows. I haven't noticed it, to be honest. But this is my pot shot of the week. Yes, it's at the American Bible Belt. Yet again, I apologize. I apologize in advance for my gross misunderstanding and being a mere Brit. I noticed something the other day, that all of them tend to be non-denominational Christians, which is the ultimate way of avoiding authority or tradition. Oh, we didn't say that. We're non-denominational. So, you know, that's another way of taking a swive and a swerve around uncomfortable facts. Thank God I'm not non-denominational. I'd rather go from denomination to denomination and learn something than avoid all the issues. And my trouble with that is, if you're going to have this sort of clean marine neutrality and never get your fingers dirty, then actually you've probably missed something. and you end up miscalculating at the same time. I noticed none of them have a good word to say about esotericism, particularly. I noticed none of them have a nice word to say about Blavatsky. I also notice that they haven't really understood what they're dealing with. Is she the arch magus trying to lead? I mean, somebody said not too long ago, Rasputin was the Antichrist. I'm like, where does it all stop? And he was one of the most powerful black magicians that had ever been born, and he was summoning this, that, and the other, and that's why World War One happens. They seem to have forgotten World War Two came shortly after. But, that's where all these terrible shenanigans were happening. And it's all great fun and it's all very interesting. But maybe the scriptures are true, and we've got to work out what they're trying to say. And misrepresenting facts and other human beings isn't going to do that. And certainly the press HPB gets is simply wrong. If they're coming from a level of critique, which I think in terms of the Bible Belt, they must. All right, look, cards on the table. I don't hate the Bible Belt. I don't totally dislike it. I think they're, at their best, they're incredibly enlightening and powerful centers of Christian witness. What worries me is the influence the Bible Belt has, way beyond the Bible Belt, and the fact it sort of doesn't realize that affects intercultural relations. It affects the way people dialogue with each other. And not everybody lives in those conditions and those environments, and just be a bit more aware of what happens, I think, beyond the Bible Belt. And certainly, as I say, in terms of Blavatsky, they're simply wrong, because that is not how she's presenting herself, as this sort of a cult queen who's trying to crush the Western world and allow demons to kick you up the arse at every possible opportunity. If you see a busy, interesting, animated, highly intelligent Russian woman who was, I agree with you on that one, who was probably doing her best to escape a difficult marriage, because women can do that as well as men, and she ends up as far away as you can possibly get from comfortable Moscow in India. You lose yourself from one street to another in India. If anyone doesn't believe me, go there or read Rori. You turn a street corner and you're completely lost. Because that's what India's like. The vastness of it all, the complexity of it all. And Central Asia is 1,000 times worse. So it's no surprise that she rushes to that part of the world to avoid certain problems, and engages her mind and her spirit and her heart in all these incredible tales. I think there's a disrespect, sadly, for colouring our culture more and more now, where if you don't agree with someone, they're demons, or they're under the influence of demons, and you simply don't appreciate what they're saying, which is interesting, and therefore don't really unveil the grains of light, uncover the grains of light that are there. Wouldn't it have been better if she was a Christian? Yes. Although, of course, as I was saying a bit earlier, her weird relationship with Russian Orthodoxy, I'm sorry, yes, it's very clearly Christian to those who don't understand it, needs to be explored further. I don't know, you'll know this, John, if there were many books written about her relationship with Russian Orthodoxy, because that does need to be explored. I noticed, like Gurdjieff, of course, who was Greek Orthodox. No, he wasn't this befezzed sort of Naqshbandi. I mean, yes, he was into Sufi schools, but of course he was also a practicing Greek Orthodox Christian his whole life. And his confessor, who ends up in mysterious monasteries hidden to the western eye in the east, was actually a monk on Mount Athos, and he names him and he says what happened to him. And Blavatsky had the same. The minute you're outside Europe and America, Anglo-America, I hate condensing like that, but the world really is a different place, and you've got to use different perspective and different tools to come to terms with it. The minute you're away from that milieu, and there's nothing wrong with that milieu, it's a beautiful milieu, it's a rational milieu, it's an exciting, progressive milieu, but there are other milieus. The minute you're outside ours, you've got to be sensitive to the checks and balances of the others because they're not like ours. And that's where the fact you belong to something as intricate as the Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox tradition takes a new sense of meaning, a new vantage point, and the fact you don't talk about it all the time because it's a known in your life. Therefore, if you go to a Buddhist temple, as Blavatsky must have done, or a Hindu temple, they will know but not choose to comment upon the fact she's an Orthodox Christian. I'll hand that back to you, John, because I think that's opening vistas. Because I don't know if anybody's written about her as Russian Orthodox.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Of course, she's a Russian, rooted in Russian Orthodox Christianity, but I, off the top of my head, can't think. Much of my exposure to her and her related works and people writing about her, and I've read so much of that. But off the top of my head, I'll have to look into that because I have some clues about where I might look to see. But one place I know you haven't looked, because it was a letter that I was shown in Madame Blavatsky's own hand, the actual letter, not a copy. And it was a friend of mine. He and his wife, they were a part of our kind of study social circle of the what we called the monastic club, and Frank and Annie Hall, and they, like many of the people in our group, they had an esoteric bookstore down in in the South, the Alexandrian Lights bookstore. But they were at one time the librarians at the Theosophical headquarters in Wheaton, Illinois. But anyways, he had this letter from Madame Blavatsky to Hartmann, and Franz Hartmann, who was a prominent Theosophist, one of the key figures that Madame Blavatsky came into contact with, and also a key bridge from Madame Blavatsky to Rudolf Steiner as they knew each other in Vienna. And that's a whole fascinating study right there. But see, in the letter, she states that she envied his connections within the Rosicrucian stream. And so you could look at that and think about that for a long, long time. And I think we're going to have to devote an episode just on that remark, because I have definitely some thoughts on the matter, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding what went on in Vienna and that whole circle of people, and how it pertains to Rudolf Steiner and so forth. So that gives all you folks something to look for or look forward to. But in that regard, I think that you have to keep in mind that Rudolf Steiner is very clear when he states that Isis Unveiled was her first monumental work, and that was the first effort to bridge science and religion, and it also is it's huge. I mean, and you look at it, and you can go and you could read Henry Steele Alcott and William Quan Judge and the people around her giving their accounts of the writings of those works. And I mean, it's amazing, because she'd be working in a room like much of the Secret Doctrine, for example, was written, and then the manuscript was lost, basically. And so she had to start over again. and she was in a small apartment, and there weren't reference materials there. Okay, well, the book is a mountain of quotations and footnotes. I mean, it literally a mountain. I mean, it has more footnotes than just about any book you've ever seen. And so you go, well, how do you do that? Well, the methodology of Madame Blavatsky is very interesting because she had the ability with her astral clairvoyance to bring before her clairvoyant perception works in various libraries and all of that, and be able to read them. Problem is when you're reading in the astral light, everything's backwards, right? Literally, it's like a mirror image. And so she would tell one of her coworkers, "Well, go to this library and they have this book. Go look and check my references." And they go there and they check it, see if she did it properly, because she worked so furiously. And so, I mean, that's remarkable because there's a whole circle of people around her that every one of them attest to that she's in this little apartment with, just maybe 5 books. And here she's referencing and quoting verbatim, several hundred books. And so that in and of itself is a real challenge to most people. That's a stumbling block for some, but that can get away. A lot of that phenomenology can get away from the import of what she's attempting to do, which is to help build a bridge for the future development of mankind as we move towards our future evolution and the fulfillment of what was accomplished by Jesus Christ through the resurrection. See, so that he's already gone ahead for us. He's the great pioneer of which we owe everything. And he has, through his embodiment in Jesus of Nazareth, beginning at the baptism and culminating after 3 years and so in the crucifixion, and then leading to the resurrection, and that most profound of mysteries is something that we're only in the initial stages of beginning to unlock its mysteries. And so that was the task of Rudolf Steiner, but to bring his particular mission was to bring the knowledge of reincarnation and karma back into the Christian stream. And he's not introducing something new, let me make that clear, but reintroducing something that was taken for granted in the early stages of the Christian stream. And just like what you say about Central Asia, your contact with those people, there are many things that they just take for granted. It's just assumed, of course, you're dealing with a person who has this particular background or that. Likewise, in understanding these things, you have to keep in mind that there's a universality of the concepts of reincarnation, because going back further in time, you get to where people have clairvoyant abilities, and more clairvoyant the further back you go. And so it becomes something that likewise is taken for granted. And so it could be missed. But these concepts of reincarnation and karma were set aside in the West, as was really the concept of the spirit indwelling the human being. And a bitter pill to swallow, but apparently necessary in the whole process of individuation, that unless we got to the point to where we felt ourselves like the prodigal son, we'd gone so far away from the Father that we'd lost our way, and then we have to return to the Father, and then the Father celebrates because we've made it back. We didn't get lost in the woods. And so there is that metaphor, and and uh, it becomes a life learning, and it becomes a source of compassion, really. And that whole impulse of the birth of compassion that happened in the 6th century BC with the Gautama Buddha, his whole eightfold path, the mysteries of the throat chakra, and the 16 petaled lotus, that there is a discipline involved with coming to an awakening. And you shouldn't limit yourself as to where you might find sources of goodness. And that was one of the things that Rudolf Steiner admired so much about Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, was he was able to expand it to a universally human viewpoint. And by that I mean that he was incorporating that Christian element to such an extent that he didn't have to wear it like it was some kind of merit badge or club membership, and that he wasn't so intimidated that he couldn't expose himself to other cultures and extract that which he saw to be of value. I mean, you look at, for example, his remarkable exposure to the Sufi poets, for example, which was, I mean, talk about a rare bird. I mean, to be contemplating Kabir in Germany in the 18th century is, that's pretty unique, don't you think? And so, likewise, in coming to understand some of this, I have to do a time check. For example, these are living realities, and they're all a part of this great mosaic that we call human existence. And in understanding Christ in a universal sense, you'd have to say that in the words of Jesus, I have other flocks. Well, what did he mean by that? I have other flocks. Well, he means that there's probably people out there that can't speak that particular language, don't know the terminology, but they're picking up on the import of what the second logos incarnate in the human form is attempting to bring to the world. It's a universally human message. It's not a private club. And so you have to have a great deal of openness, and I mean, you could look at some of the writings from the Sufis, for example. I mean, Rumi, for example. Of course, when he is referring to this type of an impulse, he always makes reference to the rose, right? That's the unlocked secret in understanding Rumi and the Christian impulses within his form of Sufism, is that whole idea of the rose as a symbol of love, because as it says in the Gospel of John, God is love. And so that's not a metaphor. Again, this is a fact. And in spiritual scientific view, you could take that as something that you can take to heart, so to speak, because that's the ultimate rose. And I wanted to explore certain avenues, but I don't want to forget, because I tend to get so caught up in this fascinating conversations, and I have such a huge stack of books around me. I just want to share with you, those of you that don't know, and those of you that do know, bear with me. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to mention David's wonderful books, Mount Athos Inside Me, Essays on Religion, Swedenborg and the Arts, with that wonderful editing by Daniela Irendust. and David's inspired Shakespearean poetry, Caliban's Redemption. Gentleman has an amazing grasp of the English language. As to other languages, I have no knowledge. But and his Grammar of Witchcraft, which is a Shakespearean study, and as I tend to say, it's not a study of witchcraft; it's a study of Shakespeare, and those are available on Amazon, and they're wonderful books. And I have my own works. My first volume, The Arcana of the Grail Angel, The Spiritual Science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail, a study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner of the underground streams of esoteric Christianity which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of the Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order, with a foreword by my best friend, Douglas Gabriel. And the sequel to that is Arcana of Light on the Path. It's more of a meditative tool based on Mabel Collins' Light on the Path, which is the first guidebook that Rudolf Steiner used when he was head of the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society in Germany. And Mabel Collins was one of the most prominent, closest associates of Madame Blavatsky. And so to take the book Arcana of Light on the Path as the meditative guide that he used in his meditative work with the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society speaks volumes of its significance. But I do examination of that as it relates to the 22 Arcana, and there's of course the whole sequence of cosmological diagrams to help you sort out many of the cryptic remarks that I make, but I can't help it. That's just the way it is. And those are available on eBay here in the United States. But if you want to access the links, because they're not active on YouTube or on Facebook, then you got to go down to my academia link, and that'll get you there because they're available on eBay. And but if you're outside the country, like people occasionally do, you can contact me directly through Facebook or through my academia link, and I can get the books to you. And so there, boy, that's a mouthful saying all that and trying not to forget something like people out there, you could buy us a cup of coffee or even a part of a cup of coffee, because I realized coffee's expensive. Geez, it's like $5-6 just to go to Star blank blank and get whatever it is they're selling. I'm not sure if it's even coffee sometimes, but you can go to paypal.me/DPARRY777 for Reverend David, or paypal.me/John Barnwell 888 for myself. And even if you just throw in $1, if like all these viewers we get, if everybody just coughed up $1, then I could buy a bunch of coffee. I drink a lot of coffee, so I need help. Anyways, it's not my nature to be plugging things, but I think there are things that are worthwhile. And so that's okay. And getting back to our subject, HPB, Madame Blavatsky. It's been one of my principal sources of inspiration. When I go back and getting into the Sikh thing, I'll tell you how much time. Oh, we got plenty of time. I'm going to tell you a story about my personal biography. And back in the very early parts of the 1970s, around the time when we had my brother and I and another friend, Gregory, he's an interesting character. He's the one who introduced me to Rudolf Steiner and Gurdjieff an Ouspensky, but he was a classmate that I met in junior high, middle school, I guess they call it these days, back when I was in the 7th grade. And the one that rang a bell for me was Rudolf Steiner, although it took gradual unfoldment to come out. And it's funny how that works. But during my own personal journey, we started an import store, the Smuggler's Imports. And Gregory would travel to Morocco and come back with Moroccan shirts, kind of like you'd see Keith Richards wearing, back in those days, because they used to go to Morocco too. But it's interesting because I was starting to open up to metaphysical type subjects back in the early 70s. It'd been around 1973. And at that time, I was confronted, like many people, with the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, or as he would say it, Paramahansa Yogananda, who is a truly remarkable individual. And I highly recommend anybody read that book because it's a testament of a wonderful soul and the remarkable individuals that he was able to meet in his personal journey. But there's an episode in his life that is quite relevant to what we're discussing here, is that when he came to America, and mind you, most of the teachers that came to America of the yogic stream from India were Shivites, almost all of them. People don't know that, but it's very rare that a Vishnuvite, there's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. It's like our Trinity. It's the creation, like continuation, and then resolution or destruction, Shiva. And so that's the simplistic view of the matter. It's of course deeper than that, but it's a threefold system, like any true esoteric system. And being that he was a Vishnuvite, which is like Vishnu is that preserving principle, and so that it's very rare that you'll get a Brahmin. There's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. It's very rare to get a Brahmin to give out teachings like, say, T. Subbarao of the early Theosophical Society, the friend of Madame Blavatsky's, who was very instrumental, and Rudolf Steiner referred to in one of his lectures as the very wise T. Subbarao. So he's a formidable scholar of Advaita Vedanta and many things of the East that are worthwhile pursuits. But it's so easy for me to digress. So Yogananda was feeling bad because he kept getting criticized by fundamentalist Christians as if he was something evil. And he actually, in his meditations, thinking about it, went into tears. And when that happened to him, Jesus appeared to him, and just with a knowing smile and a nod, and reassured him that it was okay, that everything was okay. And that's a remarkable experience. And you have a later experience of a woman approaching him. I believe it was at an airport or a bus stop or something like that. She walks up. She goes, "You're going to go to hell." And he goes, "Madam, I may get there by and by, but obviously you're there already." So he had a sense of humor. But the purity of this soul is the important thing, because after he died, they kept him in state in a glass covering, but he exuded the fragrance of roses, his decomposing body. which is, to anybody from India, they know exactly what that means, that this is a blessed soul indeed. So that being said, so I read that book, and then I noticed we got a little book in the mail from the community college. They had yoga classes. I thought, oh, cool. Okay. So I registered for the yoga class, but after reading that account, I had a dream, and that night I had a dream, and I was in the upstairs of the house, these tract homes that they built after World War II. You know, they're all over Detroit. These small homes for the returning soldiers and all that. But it had an upstairs attic that with carpet, white carpet. And it was very recognizable, very clear. And there was a gentleman with a turban conducting yoga class, sitting on a sheepskin. And I thought that was really interesting. And I went to the yoga class when it finally began, and there was the guy in the dream sitting on the sheepskin. But this was in a gymnasium. It wasn't until several months later that I went back to the ashram, the actual place where he lived with other students, and we go upstairs, and there I am in the attic that was in my dream. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. So it's a very magical introduction to that Sikh heritage. And his last name, of course, he took upon was Singh. All the Sikhs are Singh. It's a lion, right? And it's a lion, like the lion of the tribe of Judah. But it was the Sikhs who broke the caste system. So you could be of any caste and you could join the Sikhs, and you're no longer participating in the caste system. And they're some of the most industrious people in India, and the most, as you relayed, some of the most charitable. And we could do a whole episode on that. But I wanted to point out some other key Sikh teachers, although this particular school was Kundalini Yoga and went back to Yogi Bhajan Singh, who has since passed on, but who I was able to meet personally. And I remember one time I was sitting in front of him, and my yoga teacher's mother was showing him some lapis beads that she got, big, beautiful lapis. And I'm just sitting there, watching. And I thought, well, geez, I'm sitting here with the guru. I should do the mantra. And I started doing the Satnam mantra of the Sikhs. And the instant I did that, that was the only contact I had with him. He looked me right in the eyes, like, there. That's the point of this, is to let me know he was there with me. But there's interesting story regarding that, because some of the deepest teachers in India that you're going to find are included amongst the Sikhs, one of which was Charan Singh, who many may have not heard of, but he was a very deep teacher, guru, Sikh guru. I remember my friend Howard was with Charan Singh when Howard went to India, and one of the gentlemen in the audience asked about this purple super sensible being that he saw, what it was. And he looked right at Howard, who was a theosophist. He looked right at Howard and he said, that's an elemental spirit of the fifth monastic subplane. Looking right at Howard, giving a totally theosophical description, even though Howard and him had never had a conversation about theosophy, but he gave him the specific classification. These guys tend to have a sense of humor like that. They'll just catch you and let you know that they know. And then there's Kirpal Singh also. But through Kirpal Singh, it's interesting about Yogi Bhajan. I tremendous respect for him in that, to be a master of yoga, 3 hours, 55 minutes, and 6 seconds to be able to hold the yoga posture, and then they'll teach you the next one. And so when you got somebody who's gone through that kind of physical discipline, it's hard for us in the West to comprehend. But there came a point in his personal initiation to where he was told he'd have to give up the breathing exercises, pranayama, to receive the next level of initiation. He wasn't willing to do that because that would be a surrendering of the powers that he was receiving through the pranayama. So you see that there's really high grade levels of discretion that take place. And it's an interesting story, and I thought I'd share it because it's personal to me, and maybe it will be interesting to someone else. But I have a tremendous respect for the Sikhs and their golden temple in India, and they're just tremendously industrious, and their influence in Indian culture has been just huge. And so I wish them the best, and I don't know that they need my help, but I'm out here, and I do think of them frequently. And it's all in the context of the facets of the Christ mystery. And so we have to be able to, it's difficult to bring consciousness of Christ to people if you have no idea where they're coming from. And so being able to understand other streams, cultures, schools of thought, you never know when these underlying concepts are going to come in handy. And I've had opportunity of meeting great many gurus, teachers. I can't even keep track of how many of them have been. But the point I'm trying to make is, for whatever reason, of which I'm not sure I know, I've had that opportunity of meeting so many people and coming into contact directly with so many people that we mentioned here, or people that knew them. It's like being able to have conversations with Charles Jane about Nicholas Roerich, or have conversation with Dane Rudier about Alice Bailey, or Charles Jane about Alice Bailey. They both knew Alice Bailey. Personally, she's not my cup of tea, but I have some people that I respect very much, and that's their approach, and I highly respect them. I just think that the Alice Bailey's dream doesn't, in my mind, understand the central reality of Jesus Christ as being the actual human incarnation of the Logos that's unique in all human history, that there's only one incarnation, and that it happened 2,000 years ago, and that he's not going to reincarnate. He doesn't have to, because he already did that. And if somebody comes along and they say that they're that, like Benjamin Crumb, oh, well, I met him too, and where he talked about that the great teacher was incarnate at London, and they had a full page spread in the New York Times. And but I have to admit, there were definitely super sensible forces around Benjamin Crumb, and one of the alarmist people who wrote Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, Constance Cumby. Well, I knew her. I mean, I'm the one that sold her most of the books that she used to write that book. That is like, and that's the most scathing criticism of New Age thinking ever published to date. But to be spoken for her respect, she's a lawyer, by the way, is that she said, I asked her about Rudolf Steiner. She says she didn't have any problems with Rudolf Steiner, which is interesting, of course, because he's a Christian. And so you have these people that have their fundamentalist adherence to Christ, and they got the right individual in my mind. They just don't necessarily have the doctrine. But it's their right to be wrong. It's like I'm wrong all the time. I embrace it, because if I embrace my wrongness, then maybe I'll have the opportunity to correct myself at some point. But I'm going on, and I'm sure that I've sparked more than a few concepts in David's mind.
Well, I think the last one, excuse me, was the most important. It's okay not to be okay, which is something we've sort of forgotten in executive-driven corporate Anglo-America. You are human, you will die, live with it. So we've got to get some existentials back. Dane Rudyard, there's a name I haven't heard for years. Someone got me a copy. I can't even remember the book years ago of one of those works. It had such a bewildering cover that I always said I'd promised to get round to it, and I never did. Then it went missing. So yeah, I've got to go on. I've got to explore that again. Yeah, Alice Bailey simply doesn't understand Christianity. She's very interesting at the end. You don't understand Christianity, you can't be talked to. I don't mind a bit of New Age personally. I think we've got to accentuate the positive. We've got to find the gospel everywhere and realize, as you were saying, there are other flocks and there are many mansions. We've got to find the presence of Christ everywhere and stop being so judgmental. Judge not lest ye be judged. It's still true. Being a judgmental bigot doesn't mean you're a Christian. It means you're a judgmental bigot. End of. Oh, right. I don't want to talk about Sikhs because I think we need a separate show for that. Of course, they see themselves as warriors, and noble warriors in a sense that's gone missing from the West. I mean, if you look at the military training at Centre Point or Sandhurst, you have to start thinking, is that really appropriate for a democracy? They do certain things which make me uncomfortable, but I'm a minister, so there we are. But it does. I'm sorry, it makes me uncomfortable. The Sikhs see themselves as noble warriors enforcing the law, enforcing the good, doing goodwill. In context, that's nothing but beautiful. But hey, I signed the peace pledge. I'm a pacifist. What can I say? There are things above that for me. And at the end of the day, that can't be a Christian calling. It's a Christian calling, but it can't be the ultimate way of giving Christian witness. I'm perfectly willing to argue with anybody over that one. But for me, that would be a big no-no at the end of the day. Morocco, I can't remember how Morocco got into but it did. It did. It came up somewhere. I think it was something to do with the fact that the occult is in the everyday. Before I was a minister, I remember the first time I went to Morocco, an extraordinary country. The light is different. When you get off the ferry, I took the ferry from, oh God, I can't remember. It was a place near Marbella to Ceuta. I can't remember the port offhand. And I noticed the difference in light. And, the first time I'd set foot on Africa, and the energy was different, and the people were different, and they were tall and thin and graceful, which for a short, fat guy is quite disconcerting. And I remember having the curse of the evil eye put on me because they still practice street magic. And it worked. It took 48 hours to discharge. And I will just say that when I got on the gangplank of the ferry back to Spain, there was a weird feeling of warmth coming back into my body from my feet up to the top of my skull, and something like an electrical discharge. Whatever had been done had been removed. It was gone. It was nullified. Because, of course, in Morocco, you're a couple of Islamic centuries behind the West, and such things simply don't happen in our zeitgeist in the West. So it dispersed, and I consulted an occult expert, a friend of mine, a tutor, a mentor, when I got back, who confirmed my feelings of that. I don't know. I sort of love Morocco. I wish I could get to it. Jonathan Dawson, the resident, is he still there, or has he gone to Gibraltar? The British journo that seems to know everybody on the planet. And oh god, the elite, the expats of Morocco, the aesthetes. I think they're still on the Moroccan embassy website, because they live beautiful lives in every sense of the word. They didn't think much of the beatniks. Well, shame on them, because I rather like the beatniks. But you know, beautiful clothes, decent tax bracket, lovely books, lovely internal decor. Of course, they could afford it until recently. I don't know what the recent rates of exchange have done to all of that, but I think they're probably all dead, because they were pushing it anyway. Apart from Jonathan Dawson, who might still be going. And he's worth looking up, viewers and listeners. The expats, the aesthetes of Morocco, absolutely wonderful way to live. Which leads me down to one last thing. Sometimes our enemies are very revealing. I remember a saying, an anecdote, reading one by Aleister Crowley, who said about the Theosophical Society, before we get too carried away, I'm paraphrasing, basically loads of talk and no work, which I mean, that's pretty scathing. Yeah, you know, talk about yoga and meditation as much as you want. It doesn't mean you're doing it. You know, talk, bloody do yoga and meditation. Then you're doing things differently. I mean, at the end of the day, with all the respect I have for the TS, it's actually the figure of Krishnamurti that does it for me. So a man who they claimed was going to be the new Avatara, of course, the Maitreya, who when he came of age said, well, actually, no, I'm not, and became a brilliant, brilliant philosopher. The secret's in the name: Krishna, God, Murti, earth. So God in the earth. Yeah, I think that's incredibly interesting. And his down-to-earth version of Advaita Vedanta is certainly liberating beyond belief. And the fact when he was invited to the UN often and used to shout at them all for being arrogant bastards who were ruining the planet. What a great guy, a brilliant writer, and a great philosopher. So at the end, with the deepest respect to my theosophical friends and the society, and I'm hoping to do some more work with them, really I ended up with a Krishnamurti legacy from all of that, and found that very invigorating. I think we're running very, very close to our time, so I'll hand back to you, John, because I don't know how you want to handle that.
Yes, there's still fertile ground to be covered. And once again, I didn't even get to my notes. And so we could just leave it at that. And so I think that at this point, it'd be a good thing to pass it back to you and let you consecrate this endeavor with one of your inspired prayers.
Gosh, I mean, it's a big week for me, because we open negotiations with the Congregationalist Federation in Britain. So I'm asking everybody to pray for me and for us, for our little church. Valentine's Hall may be on the verge of becoming St. Valentine's Chapel. It's a long story, which I'll bore everybody with at some point. It's made me very aware of time and immediacy and getting things done. And I think that's what these programs always do for me, with my good friend John, with his wonderful partner Barbara. They make me aware of revisiting previous territory with the need to get things done. Because there's nothing we can do to achieve salvation. We are the recipients of grace. We are not the Savior. We are not the Redeemer. We are the people, the men, the women, and children that He loves. Let's not confuse the necessary works of being human with the divine gift of unending supernatural grace. And may that be extended through the prayers of this pastor to all of our viewers and listeners in the week ahead, as you struggle with the various mundanities of life, because they point beyond themselves to the greatest of all mysteries embodied in Christ Jesus. Bless you all for the week ahead. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, my brother. And thank everybody for showing up once again And I look forward to our next journey.